So I've been doing quite a lot of thinking on the run up to this conversation, and I think probably starting with my most favorite memory. And there have been lots of favorite memories, let's be real with this, but my most favorite memory was, I think, just after we'd finished doing the nerve release course in California, and I was running you to the airport. I think, was it San Jose Airport? Forget the
Okay.
name. I don't know, but I picked you up before it was sunrise, and we were driving through the hills, and it was a really windy road, and I was driving on the wrong side of the road and definitely white knuckling because I'm not used to driving on the wrong side of the road. And then we came round the corner, and it like the hills disappeared, and it was just the most incredible sunrise that we weren't expecting. And I remember both of us being like, what?
This is
As it
perfect.
appeared. And then I think we were running early or something. And there was a pull in. And so we pulled into the pull in because there was the sunrise and the beach, and the pull in looked like there was a track to the beach. So I remember pulling in and just like sharing space with someone who just appreciated the magnificence of it, of all of it, of the nature of the sky, just of the wildness that we weren't experiencing that. And I remember just thinking, oh my God, like I knew I loved this girl, but oh my God, she just got cooler. We sat and we admired the view, and we took pictures, and I think we laughed at the really rude graffiti that was on a log or
Oh, right.
something.
I forgot about that. There was always some corner of extreme humor, the beautiful nature, and
And then we went back up to the car, and I'm not even capturing the sheer hysteria that was going on right now.
I
We
was
went
very
back
enamored with this sunrise. Okay, it was magical. Like you can remember, you don't remember every sunrise, but you don't forget this one. But
to
yeah, I was very excited.
really don't. And you'd left the car door open.
Side of the highway. Like wide open. And I was like, did I really do that? I was so enamored with the sunrise that I just like got out of the car and like in a trance headed towards the water. Yeah.
And I remember telling someone about it. I can't remember who, and she went, "And you were there? Like that's the place to not leave a car door open." Um, but then the follow-up memory to that, because it is hard to choose, would definitely be after a long hard day of practicing bodywork skills, and opposite the ranch that we were at was an
Mhm.
ostrich farm. And I
Mhm.
remember
And it was
I
like
remember us
closing in 15 minutes or something ridiculous.
they were so exasperated by us appearing and being like, well, you've got 10 minutes. And
Done until
just
I'm
I got the aggressive pecking.
like, oh, they really are. They did it in
Ostriches
slow
were
motion. I'm like,
doing.
they really are prehistoric in their
They,
mannerisms. Like, we might have
they
to share
really.
some of those now, those pictures and videos.
I think I'm just going to put them over the video so people can see we're not making this up. I
Yeah.
think there may have been a selfie or two. I can't remember, but
Oh, yeah, 100%, 100%.
definitely there were definitely some slow motion videos
I
as
was
well.
fascinated by their expression.
Um, but I think since then well, that trip forged just a friendship that I'm so grateful for in
Mhm.
every way, and like the honor of getting to grow together. I just
Mhm.
think is something that I recognize is really rare, and I know people talk about it a lot, but then it actually happening is not necessarily true. And I just wanted to extend my gratitude to that for your friendship and your persistence, because you popped into my DMs, a couple of years before we met, and yeah, it's been a wild ride. Everything that's unraveled since. So thank you so much for that.
So welcome and equal gratitude towards you for it because it's just been the most unexpected, beautiful gift of friendship and growth and with our, sides with the horses and just our senses of humor and its taste for adventure. And I know that it's just, it's only early on in it and it's just been so magical and amazing since day one. So nonstop laughter. It's hard to, those are the people, those are your people.
They really are. They really are. And then I remember um the the one moment that really, there have been lots of moments, let's be honest, but the one moment that really spoke to me of, oh shit, there's this whole other world out there, was when we were working on a horse at the police unit, and
Mhm.
you said, I'm just gonna give him a little Care Bear stare, and you just gently kind of looked at him, and he just lowered his head a little bit and kind of blinked a little bit. And I got drawn into what I can only describe as a tractor beam. Like, it was the coolest feeling, that heart coherence feeling. And I remember thinking, for me, I I like intuition. I love spirituality. And then I'm also like a cite your sources kind of gal. And so
Totally.
when you did that, and I not only did I observe it, but I also felt it, and it was like hopping in, it was like hitchhiking, and it was the coolest thing
Oh, I
in
love
the
that.
world, and it just transformed everything. And now when I'm working with horses, I'm always kind of thinking, what would Holly do? What would Holly do in this moment? How would Holly show up right now? Because um it's such like a flag in the ground of the benchmark for how we show up with ourselves and how we show up with our horses. So I just wanted to share that as that.
I'm
Thank
so
you
glad
so
you
much for
did.
being like the North Star.
The term tractor beam incidentally came through very strong last night. I went out to do night check, and George was like, I could see their shadows kind of like off to the side, but you couldn't see enough to differentiate who was who. And there wasn't enough light. Like, he wears the Horsewear Ireland, so usually there's a reflector, but I couldn't see any of the reflector on his coat. But so I was just kind of scanning them, and then when I got to him, the tractor beam like lasered in, and I was like, I don't need to see my horse to know I'm looking at him. It just really was profound in that moment, and I walked towards. I'm like, oh God, I hope I'm right because I'm like so sure it's him, but what if I'm wrong? And I'm like, well, whatever, it's not the end of the world. But I just remember having these little mind thoughts. And when I got into him, it was just this most like, so I stood there and like, we're in Ontario having the blizzard of all blizzards again. So it was not pleasant weather. And it's like the third time in really unpleasant weather that the weather just kind of disappears and you're just in that space and that like that magnetic resonance from the heart syncing up. And he started yawn. It was just the most like beautiful moment, but it was so neat because I'm out there. I'm like, where are you? And I'm scanning with my eyes, but it was my heart that found him, that tractor beam feeling. So just that you mentioned tractor beam, and I was like, wow, that was the exact terminology I used last night.
It was so cool. What's really evident to me is there's obviously been a hell of a journey for you to get to this point. And as your friend, I'm aware of little bits of the journey, but I would
Yeah.
really love for you to just walk me through how you got to this point with your work, because
Yeah.
I know that no one starts where they end up, but I also know there has been a whole shift, and if you're happy to talk about that, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think sometimes it's easier to not talk about some of the hard stuff, but other times I know that I've heard other people share some stories and it really helped me to hear them and to, you can parallel or resonate. And it's also like, we have this human nature that you oh, often you can feel like what challenges you're experiencing you're on your own or you're alone with them, and it's so seldom, if ever, the case. So yeah, I was not the kind of person who would ever have imagined I'd be in the space I am in now. And I get a lot of reflections, like beautiful feedback that this is like so obviously my space. And it's there's always a tiny giggle because I'm just like, well, there was a couple of years ago, Holly, that would never have believed this. Um, and the one thing I think that's gotten me here, as long but also as quickly you can kind of have to both of those truths be true is there's just that curiosity to follow those whispers of the heart. And that's been like my lifelong, even though I was out of balance in some ways in my nervous system, growing up, long-term history of dysregulation and anxiety, very functional anxiety, very A type. And then we are able to spin it into, well, I just like working, I'm a workaholic. And we just have, and it, especially we're in a era now that's a little bit more looking at it through a different lens. But, rewind the clocks like 15 years ago. And, even to this day, busy is a badge of honor, right? It's not, but it's mistaken that way. And so we have this cultural acceptance of this way of being because so many people are this way. And it's like, people would compare, like, you're always doing all this stuff and taking all these courses and working all these hours. And I would drive 300 kilometers a day on average and see 8 horse and riders, and maybe half of them are saddle fitting and half of them are body work. But now that's a crazy schedule that no one should be trying to maintain. It's unsustainable. And yet I was able to put myself in a place that I was sustaining that for 2 decades. Like it didn't really start slow. It started pretty darn fast. Like once the ball got rolling, it was a full-time gig and it just never slowed down. So living in the fast lane and all of those things, I also didn't have the awareness of emotional regulation. I didn't realize back in the day that if something bothered me, that I had a choice by it. It's like, well, that made me mad. So you give away all your power when something makes you mad. Nothing makes you mad. I won't try to tangent too long into that. So I used to be those ways that I think a lot of people can resonate with. Um, and then in the beginning of 2020, I actually started to kind of lean into this direction, and nothing had really changed. I was still working and everything, but there was just a strong calling. Like I've always studied in my truck driving neuroscience. I took some applied neuroscience training over the years, fascinated by the brain, and was really got into it with, I read a book probably 10, 12, 15 years. I don't know how long ago, but a long time ago, The Power of Habit. And the first paragraph of that book irritated me because it told me I wasn't making my own decisions. And I was like, yes, I am. How dare you? Like, what are you talking about? And then you start getting into it. And I was like, oh my God, there's something, I need to know more about this. So that was like my gateway into wanting to understand neuroscience. And then I've always loved anatomy since grade school. Like as soon as we got, like, I remember getting into like, we had the projectors back then where you had to like take a marker and draw on the clear plastic. And I was always doing joints and muscle. I just thought it was like, anatomy has always been fascinating. So I got into equine massage straight out of high school and was following this very much body oriented path, this physical path. And then all of these horses were having sore backs. I was working with a vet practice as a veterinary office manager and head assistant, and everyone's sore. So we started digging into why the backs are sore. And you start, like, when you have this long 20+ year career with the same industry, like you really can, when you start to step back, you can recognize some of the patterns. And myself included, there's a lot of patterns of, stress and how much, like, horses aren't free. They can be taxing on the bank account, and that can equal stress. And we don't want to do anything wrong, but there's so many different points. So there's people judging us, or which way do we hear all these cooks in the kitchen? Like, what do we believe? What's right for us, and wanting to do right by our horse. And so there's just a lot of emotions that came up over my career. And I also didn't always know how to process what I was seeing if it wasn't aligned what I thought would be ideal for the horse. So there's been a lot of that. So over the years, like, I go into these different directions because I want to highlight that this is all, like, I've been a complex learning, but it's been through a lot of experiential, and then the education, we were able to put a language. So it's like like we love the spirituality. I've always had one foot on yes, cite the sources. Like, where are we at with science? Not that I want to trust the science because science in truth is always evolving. Where are we at with the science? And then what I've really leaned into is how do I embody that science? Like, how do I not just learn it, but how do I eat, sleep, and breathe it? And that's the process because that takes a lot of rewiring. And as I've just described, there's a lot of complex layers and emotions and perceptions. And so that kind of led to coming to a pinnacle in 2020. I ended up getting diagnosed with cancer. It was very unexpected because I was meal prepping, eating out of glass since before it was cool. I was already doing a lot of what everyone would think would be healthy. And what's not healthy is not knowing how to process your emotions, not knowing how to stop being stressed out and working 7 days a week. Like, I just didn't count those. I slept pretty good. I ate really good. I exercised 5 days a week. On the outside, it looked like everything was fine. So that came as a bit of a shock. But then I also just kind of got in the driver's seat with, okay, so this is how it's going to go. And I think that actually was what got a lot of attention is just like, wow, like there's a perceived way that you're supposed to react when something like that happens in your life. And I didn't match the perceived like, expected way. And it was like another way was possible. And I had the experience of losing my precious cat of 19 years about 2 months prior to that. And, I actually wrote a piece about how her, like the gift of that, because it was in that moment where I wanted to just let everything fall apart. And I was like, do we really have to? Does it mean you're not grieving in the right way if you're not completely destroyed? Like, can you hold on to some sense of self and honor the grief? And I felt like the frayed edges about to like go up in flames. And then I just like was able to like connect with my breath and sit there and grieve her, but not be that typical, like really, really distressed piece part. So that was kind of it. And then I've actually had to deal with a little bit of chronic illness for a couple of years, a little bit of the old pattern coming up and reminding me that like old habits they hard as they say. And when you've spent your entire life at that level of go and anxiety and your entire system is wired to be operating in that level of frequency into those neurochemicals that are flowing through you. So just changing because you know it's the right thing to do is really difficult. You really, it's like a complete reconfiguration of your system. And that takes, you can do it through repetition over time, or you have a catalytic event that changes your paradigm instantly. So I had a bit of both. I was kind of doing both. And so um, I got into mountain biking about 8 years ago. And that's where I first found my breath because I noticed how I was breathing was really affecting the way I ride. Spoiler alert, completely applicable to riding horses, like unbelievably applicable and so easy to test. We can jump back to that later if we like. But so I had an awareness of my breath from mountain biking because I got into the downhilling and you need to be breathing to stay rubber side down. And then, yeah, but when I did get diagnosed, I had 33 days from diagnosis to surgery. And I didn't know if I was going to be able to continue with like, I just didn't know anything. So it was like, yeah, you've got 33 days to like completely rearrange your life and your business. And there's a whole pile of unknowns coming your way that you need to make really big decisions about. So it was a pretty big event. And what I did is I just was like, intuitively, it felt, so it was breast cancer. And I was like, I have no idea what a breast is, like outside of like knowing what a breast is. But like, I was like, I don't know what's beneath the skin. So I've got, because anatomy was always my thing, I have the Netter's Anatomy coloring book and the big atlas. And so I just started like opening the atlas and looking at the parts and going like, oh, wow, that's fascinating. That's beautiful. Like it just got really, and I noticed that as I got really connected to my internal world, I started to feel better. I started to feel more relaxed, even though there was a big, I've got a 33-day countdown coming and it's, everyone would be totally appreciating if I was feeling pretty stressed out about that. But the more that I looked, and then I was just like noticing my breath when I was looking, changing, and I just started sending my breath to the areas. And I literally just prepared this area of my body. I'm like, this is what's going to happen. This is what's coming. And it's going to be okay. And I'm going to love you as much, if not more, after the surgery, because I did have reconstruction surgery. And I just felt like all this like worry and stuff started to dissipate. And then I have to laugh because like they give you pamphlets afterwards, and I was looking at them, and it was such a different approach. And it's not saying it's not right for some people; it was not right for me. But I was like, yeah, that's just not resonating. And I just kept doing this, looking at the internal world, connecting to my internal world, and then bringing my breath in as this vehicle to bring my mind to the body parts. And I couldn't believe how much safe I felt in the scariest moment of my life. And so then I got through that and I jumped back in my truck and started going back to work. Lo and behold, didn't feel so good shortly after that. And to the point where I could really tell it was the days that I got into that work environment that my body was like, no, we're not doing this. And I'm going to make sure that you become fully aware that this is no longer an option. So I was stubborn. And then now I'm no longer stubborn. I'm much more accepting of this is all part and parcel of how I got it. Like if I didn't go through that, would I have created this modality, this practice? Probably not. I don't know, but probably not. So now it's become this beautiful service that I get to offer other people, and they are all experiencing these beautiful benefits. And I never thought that anything would be more rewarding than fitting a saddle because it's still obviously very rewarding. But this is a whole nother level of rewarding because from that person, their whole world gets to ripple out and create that. I've had clients be able to bring other people into a more coherent nervous system just by being like there's that co-regulation that happens. Like you're that person they feel more comfortable around. There's just a whole like long list. I won't go into right this second, but yeah, that's the unprepared journey story.
I think the thing that I think about a lot when I'm walking through life and stepping foot into that trail is the relationship between surrender and taking action.
Mhm.
And surrender not being passive, honoring your
Right.
body when your body is saying, we're not going to do this today.
Yeah.
Um, and then saying, but what will nourish you instead?
Mhm.
What do you need? And that's not the piece of chocolate in the fridge. Maybe one day it is a piece of chocolate in the fridge, but usually it's what can I do to nourish my body so that I can get out of this feeling which isn't serving me, or so I can honor this feeling. How can I change the environment I'm in? And I think that's really difficult when I know that something that's a constant battle in my life is the difference between being driven and being dragged. The
Love
whole,
that.
am I driven by my career because I find it fascinating and I love to learn and I love the influence that I have on the people around me and I love supporting them to make good choices for their horses and I love working with their horses, or am I being dragged because of a narrative that you build around what it is that you're offering and what might happen if you
100%.
don't offer that? What happens if you say, I'm not hitting the road today because I don't feel great? What are the trickle down effects of that? Sometimes you have a client who is like, oh, yeah, no, I get that. You work really hard. I understand, take the time you need. And other times you get a client who's not like that. And navigating that is hard because they're upset, is is their lived experience. I find that to be the ebb and flow of life, I think.
It's also a good way to find your aligned clients.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
It is. So talk to me about what where you're finding work now. Talk to me about um kind of what's exciting you in your offerings right now.
Yeah. So it's funny because I'm really have shifted into the space from saddle fitter and equine body worker. I still like do a little bit of that for a couple clients at a more specialized in a more specialized way. But primarily I've moved into what I never imagined, which it sounds like it shouldn't be surprising because I've been studying neuroscience like for the last 10 years out of curiosity. And that's come in forms of courses and certificates and audiobooks and podcasts, like all the things. So why I'm surprised is kind of funny. But then it's a bit of a trifecta where it's the nervous system and brain. it's the heart and breath. And they are, you can't really in my world, you can't really separate them. And I find them all equally fascinating. And if there's one that is like you said, a bit more North Star, it's definitely the heart. And even, I can say that so easily now, but before I was this personality, it would have been like, heart, excuse me, like what? Like it's just so not like what I thought I'd be totally fascinated in. So, I've gone into understanding like quantum fascia. So it's hard to pinpoint, but everything comes down to the heart space and the frequency of the heart and the emperor, the heart giving 10 times more information to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. Like that, I remember when the first time I heard that and I was like, okay, I'm going to sit back and just think about this for a second, like make that make sense. Like I like many, assume that the brain is up there processing and controlling everything like that. So you got to fix your brain. Oh, my brain's this, my brain's that. How's your heart? And so I love my favorite thing in the world right now is helping people connect to their heart space with one foot in the scientific realm and one foot in the experiential realm. And then when you amplify that experience with the horses, how much that enriches the partnership. Like even talking about it, I can just feel like the full body, like every cell starts dancing, right? It's just like, yes, that's it, that's it. So I'm actually just doing my first cohort of heart horse experience. And we're just going to learn to ethically create co-regulation. So the first thing I say on the first day is we lean in, we don't lean on. So it's this beautiful co-creation space. And what I have been able to experience with my horses, it started off with, you see those romantic relationships with horse and riders, and they have these like beautiful moments and they look so connected and the horses are in this different space or they're laying down with them. And I was like, I didn't want to learn any new training methods. That didn't feel like what I wanted to learn, but I was like, I want that connection. Like, what is that connection? And for a lot of years, I've had my horses. I didn't have that. I had a great connection, but I didn't have that connection. And it was through doing this work through the heart that it's like this big gate opened up. And I can go out there and it looks like I'm just sitting around having hot chocolate with my horse while he eats. And sometimes that's how it started. It didn't start with more than that. It was just, I'm going to sit here and eat with you. And then you start noticing where your attention's going. You notice your energy, you notice your heart space. And then when you tap in with this like feeling or a question, and then your horse stops eating and he looks right through your eyes, like right through your soul. And then I was like, yesterday when I was doing it, and I was like, can you please give me a sign that I'm not imagining this. Like, I know I'm not, I can feel it, but like, can you do something? Like, can I ask you? And he's like, sure. And he leans over and just does those little nuzzles on the hand. And then he stops. And I was like, can you do it again? He's like, sure. So I was like, okay. Like, it's just, so for me, it's like we as equestrians or horse lovers, I feel like there's this huge piece of our relationship that we don't even necessarily know is available to us. And I have always said that horses have been evolving humans. In the beginning, it was transportation, like, the reason we were able to connect as humans, like the railways, the mines, the wars. And then when they became more of a luxury than human evolution, there's actually more to that story, and they can really help us create more heart coherence, more consciousness. And they're like these sentient beings that are just here to help us evolve emotionally and spiritually. And for some reason, that's my next chapter with them. And I just never saw it coming. And I'm so grateful that I was able to pause my thinking mind. And I got a little help with being knocked down on my knees a couple times to sit down and listen to the lessons that were being shown to me, and that I get to just be part of this. And I know there's other amazing, beautiful humans working in a very similar way. And I'm seeing more and more of it. And it's beautiful.
It's something that I'm really grateful for, having had Kat come into my life, and she's 2.5 now. And I made the very conscious decision when I got another horse that it would not look like how I used to do things, because that didn't resonate anymore. And that if she is to be a ridden horse, which is entirely up to her, I'm completely ambivalent about the outcome there. Um, I just I just want her to live a fulfilling life, whatever that looks like, and I would love it if we could journey that one together. Um, but I my ebb and flow between my being and doing mind has, kind of upregulated and downregulated depending on the external stimuli, and that's something that I ruminate on quite a lot. And then when I call myself on my own internal bullshit, um, and I say, no, we're going to circle back to this. And it's always circling back to the breath, circling back to the sitting and being, circling back to the breath, circling back to the sitting and being, and recognizing the feelings in my body. And it's wild, the response that the horses have to that. And just yesterday, I it was snowing at home, and I had my little cup of cacao that I take with me to the yard, and I took my
I
little
love it.
stool
Like
so I
kind of
wasn't sat
character.
in the mud. And um and one of her blankets, not that she wears any blankets, but they're there just in case she needs them. Um and I went into her little loafing area and I sat under the tree in the loafing area, and she came over and she was like, "Oh, you're here again. This is great." And she just hangs out with me. And this horse is 2.5 years old. Like, you know, and there's me thinking, she wants to spend time with me. And it
Choosing,
doesn't feel difficult and it doesn't feel hard.
no
And
training required.
then yeah, and I just think, if this is what it is for the next 30 years, oh, what an honor, what a privilege to be able to coexist with another being that doesn't even speak verbal language. And I just, oh, it's everything. And it makes me think, I was having a conversation with a client the other day, and her horse has got quite a lot going on in his body, and there's talks of vets and things, and we were talking about the ramifications of the findings, and I said, what if you could be a person that just loved hanging out with their horse? What would that look like? Like, this feels like a revolution to me, just
Yeah,
changing the world one heart space at a time, and I think it's really fun.
I can't agree more. And my horse Whiskey, he just turned 30 on Valentine's Day, so just a couple days ago. And I met him when he was 3 and I was 16. And so we just, we mentioned earlier, like how I want to do things with her is different than I want to do in the past. And him and I have lived through the different versions of ourselves over so many years. And I just can't think of any greater way to honor that journey together. I mean, he wasn't with me until 2019. No, when did he come? 2000 and I've had him 11 years, whatever that is right now. The numbers aren't working. But like, I became his person about 11 years ago. But having been able to be around him and just having this, I did lease him way back when. So we've had these like different chapters in these different parts of our lives. And, it's sometimes there's that thing like, oh, my horse is retired. Like, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, the wisdom of a senior's horse's heart is so precious. It's like there's a reason we call them the golden years. And I think it's so amazing to hear. I light right up when I hear about a young horse getting into this practice from the get-go. And I've experienced it with clients' horses, my horses. I've helped clients. I've only worked with like 1-to-1, even in a single session, achieve some really remarkable results. So the more you practice, the more you get. But it's so accessible and available to people. So yeah, I do think it's a bit of a heart-led revolution where, and when you're in that space, it's like we can start looking at scientific benefits of HeartMath has done all kinds of beautiful research. So if you need that, cite the resources, it's there. And I would love to even compare a little bit to what we see from the meditation side of things. We're designed to be connected to our heart space. And that's something that I'll be, like I mentioned earlier, doing some more offers around with just like the heart space itself. But as equestrians, we have the most amazing gift of our horses with their massive hearts and their massive heart space. And I feel like it's just waiting for us, and we just didn't know about it until more recently. Some people got into it earlier, but I feel like there's a whole wave that people are going to really lean into this practice and just be all the happier for it.
It really resonated with me when you said about not wanting to learn any more training methods, because that didn't resonate with you. And I really understand that when I've been reflecting on training, and I use inverted commas with that, with Cat, because when I reflect on the long-term partnerships I've had with horses, has it been training or has it just been the accumulation of life experiences which come together to support the whole, that their end product, if you like? Um, but also really exploring around, is it appropriate as well, particularly looking at norms within the industry and sort of standardized procedures that people might choose to train their horse, and thinking, but is this appropriate? Does this feel right? How can I determine whether this is appropriate or not for my horse? And that comes from a physiologic perspective of the musculoskeletal development, the nervous system state. And then also there's this other layer that you can tap into, which is almost that permission
Mhm.
layer, which is, how do you feel about this? And properly feel, not just looking at their face from an ethogram perspective, but what is your energy saying? What feedback am I getting from you? And is this okay? I I wanted to pick Cat's feet out, brush them off, and take pictures of them to send them to my trimmer, just to see whether there was anything that I could do between trims to support her. And also she's two, and she has this finite window where she might like to hang out with me, and then there's also other things that she'd like to do because she's exploring the world. And I remember thinking, okay, how am I going to set this up? Okay, so I'm just going to visualize what it is that I would like. So I literally visualized watching myself picking her foot up and her being relaxed, and then me picking her foot out and feeling the relaxation in her body and feeling how okay she was with that. And then I kind of posed that back to her as a question of, is this okay? And I
Mhm.
got, yeah, that's okay. And so I picked her foot up and really felt the relaxation in her body, which was like nothing else we'd achieved
So
before.
rewarding. So
And
rewarding.
picked her foot out. And then I just felt her go, I could do with that leg back now. And it wasn't a snatch, it was just
That's enough.
a change, just a tiny, palpable flavor in the air.
Mhm.
And so I placed her leg back on the ground. And then I said, I'd really like to do this now, and kind of visualized picking the foot up again and brushing the foot off, and then taking a picture. And because I'd like to send a picture to Becky so that we can just see if there's anything more that we can do with her feet. Would that be okay? Yeah, sure, that's okay. And so I did it again, and then it came to the other front leg, and I finished with the other front leg, and I thought, if that's all we achieve, if that's it, then
Masterful.
like, I mean, I was done with the first leg hold. That
Right? You're
has made
like,
my year. I can live off of that for the
I
year,
feel it. I feel it too.
Um, and then we got round all 4 feet, and the last foot, I could feel she was like, I am done now. And I thought, yeah, you are done. Thank you so much. You were incredible. I really just am so amazed. And all of that on the run up to choosing that approach, I thought, okay, so we could do it as a positive reinforcement based approach where I pick her foot up and I give her the treat, and then I thought, but there feels like an underlayer that we're not including here, and I want to include that underlayer, that uh I don't want to do a disservice to any sort of other training methodologies, but it just felt like there was a piece missing. And it was
Definitely.
really cool to be able to employ what I've learned on this journey so far. And that has come from sitting quietly in the presence of a horse. That hasn't come from going
Right.
to a clinic and someone teaching me. And it's really cool. The avenues, what I'm getting at, there is a purpose to this whole this whole waffle, but what I'm getting at here is the work you offer. It's not prescriptive.
Right.
I think the beauty of the work is that everyone takes away the piece that they need,
Yes.
even if
Yeah.
it's difficult. I know I've sat and felt like I was kind of itching out of my skin, and being okay with that feeling, not being
Doesn't
learning
last
to not be
forever.
frustrated that I'm not doing it perfectly. Um,
It's a
so
big,
yeah,
there's a sense of self-acceptance in that moment that translates to acceptance of your horse.
yeah, yeah, it really is. It's really, really cool. So thank
Hmm.
you.
Oh, it's amazing because I come from a space, a headspace of like so much doing, like fixing, fitting, you know, and then but whiskey has always been this guiding light for me. He's taught me. I could write many books, I think, on what he's taught me. But even when I went to learn Liberty with him, because I got him at 19 without any intention of riding him. But when I would take him in the arena, his old lifestyle was as soon as he got into the arena, it was to take off and run around. And you barely had time to unclip, right? It was just like, I'm gonna just go blast off the moment I can. So if you don't have that unclipped, you're coming, getting dragged. Or if I put poles in the ground, he would just want to like back away and drag me away from them. So to go from that into Liberty, where we even like found out ways we could like kind of dance together. And, I'm not an expert, I'm not a horse trainer. I don't pretend to be. I don't teach other people how to work with their horses that way. But we were able just by receiving each other's energy and receiving each other's ideas of perception of the situation. And now we're at the point where I like come out with the brushes and some days he doesn't want this certain brush, so he'll just put his teeth on it. But if he wants that brush, he'll just wiggle his lips on it. So I'm like, we have this level of communication where he can let me know which brush he wants. And I've been getting that with George too. And it seems like it's slow and takes a long time, but it really doesn't. And it turns into everything you do with your horse having this, it's this consent base, but it's also this, there's less resistance. So when you do want to get into some training aspects, you have this like deep level of trust and connection. And it sounds like everyone says, oh, trust and connection. But it really is palpable where you have this like deeper layer where you're talking with the way you look at each other.
Mhm.
And then if you ask a question, they will respond. Like that blew me away. It's been happening for years. It just never gets old. I'm like, that just happened again. Interesting. Because we're so conditioned to not believe that's the way it can be. Or it's like the one blue moon situation. But I think it's available for everyone with their horses. But it does require us to be in a place where we can access the state of giving and receiving versus doing.
That's really interesting because I also think that it can serve as the first alarm bell before something goes wrong.
Totally.
And then I think that has the power to help us help our horses because if you lose that bit of connection, you can think, okay, why has that happened? What do I need to pay attention to? Where has that occurred? What situations has that occurred in? Okay, I would like to dial everything back to rebuild that connection and then
Right?
really listen. Where is it going wrong? Um, Most recently, this is with Tokyo. For people who don't know, he's my dog. Um, he'd started getting really anxious, and we're doing a lot of building work in the house, and he doesn't particularly appreciate that sort of thing happening. But then I remember reflecting and thinking, okay, so the building work is happening, but what else is happening?
Mm,
And it really made me reflect on how I'd fallen into the habit of flying around like a headless chicken again, even without realizing that I was doing it, even down to what tone do you leave the house in? What's the flavor of the air around you when you're getting your shoes on to leave? How is that influencing him and his anxiety and all of these things where my actions are influencing him, obviously, obviously
We're
they're
regulating
influencing.
whether we're aware of it or not. Like our energy
Yeah,
field is mixing at all times.
yeah, yeah. And then also I think it's really powerful because in being able to catch myself and say, okay, we need to give more time around that. It also then it creates more value within day-to-day life. So you're not chasing the highs of the adrenaline and the other things. You're looking at the quality in between the big moments, which I
Oh,
think is really
God.
important.
I
And
that is like a mic drop statement right there to me. It's so true. So true.
and then with our horses, you know, going slowly, I think people have this idea that going slowly means that it's less beautiful. And I think actually with the going slowly, it's more beautiful because you
A
see
lot
all
less
of
of the
these
badge of
little
honor and
things.
all that perceived societal norm of like faster, more productive, busy, getting stuff done.
Yeah,
And it's like, but what about being as a human being? Like,
yeah,
where does that count?
yeah. And I reflect back on even when I used to compete, and my best tests that I did were tests where I was aware of every movement that I made in my body, not every movement in the kind of macro test.
Mhm.
And so that yeah, there are so many filters that create a smaller picture, which is just so enriched with experience, and then also building into a bigger picture. But then I think it's with the smaller picture that you can appreciate the bigger picture even more.
Where you get your compound interest.
You really do.
Yeah. And
You
that's how you
really,
get the big wins without the big effort.
yeah, absolutely. And I firmly believe um now I've had the fortune of kind of touching this world. I firmly believe that everyone needs to find this. I think the world would be a significantly better place. Maybe, from a bodywork perspective, I would have less work. But I think the
Food would
world
be
would be a
great.
better place. And it's all about, power to the people so that we can all support our own individual self to then go on to support other people as well.
Yeah, it's really beautiful to be in a space and a place that your work is having that ripple effect out. And what I learned, which was not easy to learn, but now that I understand it, I feel like I can help people learn it a lot easier and quicker than what it took me, is that letting go of attachment and to that surrender, that acceptance. But it's the when we have that attachment to how it's supposed to look and feel, we're putting ourselves behind the eight ball, and it makes it hard. And how much in our life are this is just the replica. This is just one example with our horses, but we can take that and translate it out through life as well. And then the other thing is, I always think about when horses were in war, and you see those pictures where they were like literally lying down in a war field protecting their rider. Like, what kind of connection did they have with their horses to be in that severe of an environment and have that level of connection still be that strong? Like, I've always wondered where, what was happening on an energetic level between their nervous systems and their, like, yeah, it's just
Mm,
really, really
mm.
fascinating to me.
Yeah, I've thought that as well. Maybe not in the depth of the thought, but wow, what must that have been like without wishing that upon myself?
Yeah, like, and if it's possible in that environment, it's possible out here in our backyards. Right? I think we can do it, guys. I think we can do
It
it.
will be okay. Uh, so with that in mind, because I will shamelessly be sending people your way until the end of time. Can you just tell me where people can find out about your work and your offerings?
Yeah, so I'm working on a website which will be out in not too long, but for now, especially Facebook and Instagram, I am there. My breath work is InteroBreath.com, so we can post that as well. And that's a really cool place. We have a really beautiful community, and We meet twice a week, and sometimes people are in the barns with the animals. Sometimes I turn on my screen and there's a goat and a turkey and a mule or a donkey, and so it's so fun. Cats are really big participants, and dogs too, but especially the cats. So we've got a really, or you're set in the house, but we have that space is like it's kind of where you kind of come in and tune up the whole connection piece. So that's pretty main ongoing. And then my newsletter, I just update people what offers are coming up because I know the heart experience where we just started this round and there's already people waiting for the next one. So I'll be putting that out as well. So those are a couple places.
That's awesome. And then, of course, we've got our webinar, which we're doing,
Yeah,
which I'll also link in the show notes, which is Bridging the Horse-Human Connection with Breath, which I'm
yeah.
really excited about.
Such
So
a
I'll
nice,
post
easy
that
place
too.
to start. And we're not going to get too heavy on the science side. Like we'll have a little bit of understanding, but just, yeah, just this really neat this way that you can start to implement it with just a little bit of guidance and see the results for yourself.
Awesome. I really appreciate you and I really appreciate what you're offering out to the world right now. Thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me and for sharing this work. I love sharing it with people and I'm just really honored that you are also helping promote it. So thank you.
It's nothing but a pleasure. Thank you.